Think you've seen every kind of horror a film can deliver? Think again. Some terrors don't lurk in shadows, or behind locked doors, or inside haunted houses. Some horrors whisper through broken frequencies, flicker between distorted frames, and crawl out of a screen that should have been silent. For decades, scattered across late-night broadcasts, limited theatrical screenings, and regional TV airings, a strange pattern kept resurfacing. Certain horror films simply refuse to play normally, audio warping without cause, frames tearing only at specific scenes, sudden moments of static, as if something or someone was interfering. Projectionists blamed the machines, engineers blamed the tapes, studios blamed the broadcasters. But the people who were actually there, the viewers sitting in the dark, the technicians monitoring the feed, told a different story. They spoke about whispering voices that weren't part of the soundtrack, shadows appearing between frames that didn't exist in the original cut, and broadcasts that malfunctioned only during moments tied to rituals, curses, or violent acts. And most unsettling of all, the tapes were flawless the next day. The signal was perfect. The errors never returned. So tonight, we're diving headfirst into a corner of horror history that's rarely discussed and even more rarely explained. These aren't just films. They're glitches in the fabric of whatever we think is real. These are the stories of movies that seem to fight against being seen, interrupted by static, swallowed by silence, or distorted by forces no technician ever managed to trace. Let's step into the noise. Let's explore the interference. Let's descend into Voices in the Static. 1. The Legend of Lizzie Borden, 1975. At the top of the list is a film whose broadcast history remains one of the strangest ever documented. The Legend of Lizzie Borden, a dramatization of the infamous murder case, aired to massive viewership, but the premiere became notorious when several stations reported an unexplained signal bleed. During moments of rising tension, faint flashes of imagery appeared, a blurred corridor, a shadow crossing a doorway, a sliver of movement that didn't belong to any frame of the film. These intrusions lasted only milliseconds, too short to analyze, too long to ignore. When the stations reviewed their broadcast logs, the bleed didn't exist. No foreign footage, no splice, nothing that could have slipped through an analog chain. What's more, the phantom images appeared only in scenes tied to memory and accusation, as though the film's themes of fractured truth were manifesting inside the broadcast. The Legend of Lizzie Borden already blurs the line between guilt and perception, forcing viewers to question what they believe they've seen. The broadcast anomalies heightened that ambiguity, making some wonder whether the signal had momentarily revealed something unscripted. A glitch? A coincidence? Or an echo of a story too old and too stubborn to stay confined to a screen? Sometimes the most disturbing images aren't the ones filmmakers create. They're the ones that slip in uninvited. To Kolchak, The Night Stalker, Demon in Lace, 1975. Although technically an episode of a cult horror series rather than a feature film, Demon in Lace earned its place in broadcast lore thanks to a series of anomalies that defied every technical explanation. During its initial regional airings, viewers reported that the episode's musical cues bent subtly out of key, not enough to register as a deliberate choice, but enough to unsettle anyone familiar with the show's usual sound palette. The warping occurred only during scenes in which the demon manifested, as if the broadcast were reacting to its presence. Sound engineers analyzed the master. Flawless, no pitch shifts, no corrupted frames. Yet during the broadcast, the music faltered like something leaning on the edges of the soundtrack. Some viewers claimed they heard a faint scraping layered beneath the score, a sound that resembled a stylus dragging across vinyl. It appeared for seconds, never long enough to isolate, never predictable enough to trace. Demon in Lace is a story about illusions wearing human skin, about truth slipping in and out of visibility. The broadcast distortion made those illusions feel invasive, less like a narrative device and more like an entity pressing against the screen. The anomaly never returned in reruns, but those who heard the warped notes swear it felt intentional, like the episode wasn't just depicting possession but performing it. 3. The Stone Tape, 1972. Few horror films have influenced the genre's relationship with technology as deeply as The Stone Tape, a story about scientists who attempt to rationalize a haunting through the language of analog signals and stored energy. Ironically, the film's earliest broadcasts suffered from their own stored energy, as viewers described it, a sudden bloom of static whenever the characters conducted sound experiments in the haunted room. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It came like a pulse one burst, sharp and cold, precisely in sync with the moments when the researchers turned their equipment toward the presence they couldn't explain. BBC technicians were baffled. The interference didn't appear in test transmissions or archival recordings, only during the live broadcast. And the static had a directionality to it, cutting through dialogue in narrow, focused bursts, almost like a reply. Those who watched described the sensation not as hearing a glitch, but as being answered. The stone tape is built on the idea that trauma can be imprinted into physical space, replaying itself like an ancient recording. The broadcast anomaly made that concept frighteningly literal. When the static erupted, it felt less like equipment malfunctioning and more like the house pushing something back through the signal. In a film about the limits of human perception, the interference became its own thesis. Some echoes don't fade. They find a way out. 4. The Ash Tree, 1975. Adapted from the ghostly prose of M.R. James, the ash tree is eerie even in perfect conditions. Rural isolation, lingering curses, and shadows that feel older than the land itself. But one particular BBC broadcast made the film infamous. During its first airing, scenes involving the ash tree itself exhibited a strange ripple effect, horizontal distortions that bent the image subtly, as if the tree were pulsing. Engineers blamed temperature variance in the transmission lines, yet the distortion affected only frames in which the tree dominated the composition. What unsettled viewers was the timing. Whenever the cursed tree became a focal point, the ripple moved across the screen like a breath, slow, deliberate, almost organic. Some audiences recalled seeing shapes inside the ripple, as though something was shifting behind the distortion. But once the broadcast ended, every recording of the film appeared perfectly stable. No ripples, no warping, nothing. The ash tree explores guilt, superstition, and the idea that past sins can outlive the people who committed them. The broadcast anomaly turned the tree into more than a symbol. It became a presence, reacting to attention. The ripple felt less like a glitch and more like a warning. Some roots grow deeper than we can see, and some stories resist being told without consequence. 5. The Possessed, 1977. A late 70s exorcism thriller riding on the popularity of demonic horror, The Possessed seemed destined to blend into television's supernatural wave, but its premiere came with a phenomenon that no one forgot: sudden bursts of high-pitched static during scenes involving prayer or invocation. The sound was sharp enough to make some viewers mute their televisions, only to find that the static persisted faintly beneath the silence, a ghost frequency riding the broadcast. Technicians attempted to replicate the issue using the master tape. Nothing. The audio was clean, consistent, unremarkable. Yet during the broadcast, the static always aligned with a character confronting the unseen force. Not before, not after. The timing was so precise it felt intentional, almost like an opposing presence trying to overwrite the dialogue. The Possessed is a film about spiritual warfare and the fragility of faith under pressure. The broadcast anomaly made that conflict feel tangible, as though two signals, one human, one not, were fighting for dominance. Some viewers described the interference as a shriek hiding in the static, while others said it felt like a pressure in the room. In a story where the divine and the damned clash, the signal itself became part of the battleground. And the haunting didn't come from the screen, it came from the broadcast reaching your home. 6. The Norliss Tapes, 1973. The Norliss Tapes was meant to launch a supernatural mystery series that never came to be, but its lone pilot left behind a broadcast legend far more unsettling than the show itself. During its earliest TV airings, viewers reported a strange fluttering distortion whenever the titular tapes were played on screen. The warbling wasn't part of the soundtrack, nor did it resemble a typical analog dropout. Instead, the fluctuation carried an uncanny rhythm, like someone whispering too close to a microphone, just beyond comprehension. In the story, the tapes contain the desperate, fragmented testimonies of a missing writer uncovering occult horrors. The broadcast anomaly seemed to mimic that fragmentation, as if the signal itself was cracking under the weight of whatever truth the tapes were about to reveal. Engineers blamed momentary interference, but what troubled them was its precision. The distortion never occurred when characters discussed the supernatural, only when the physical tapes were rewound or played. This synchronicity made some viewers feel as if they were listening to an actual corrupted recording, something bleeding through from outside the narrative. The Norliss Tapes already explores themes of documentation, belief, and the limits of rationality. The broadcast broadcast interference turned it into something eerily participatory, as if the audience was being invited to hear what wasn't meant for them. Sometimes horror doesn't need a monster, just a voice trying to surface. 7. Don't Look Now, 1973. Don't Look Now is widely regarded as one of the greatest psychological horror films ever made, a meditation on grief, perception, and the fragile boundary between reality and delusion. But a lesser-known piece of its history involves a strange series of projection mishaps during early art house screenings. Certain reels would momentarily desaturate, bleeding all color except for shades of red, only to snap back to normal seconds later. Technicians insisted the print was flawless. The reels showed no fading, no temperature damage, no chemical imbalance. The effect occurred exclusively during moments tied to the film's recurring motif, flashes of red tied to memory, trauma, and a looming sense of inevitability. Viewers were convinced the sudden monochrome was intentional, a daring stylistic choice. Projectionists were equally convinced it wasn't. Some even claimed the projector's bulbs dimmed slightly during the anomaly, though the voltage readings remained stable. Don't Look Now already plays with visual doubt, building its tension around the idea that what you see can't always be trusted. These color drops made that theme literal, as if the film's subconscious bled through the machinery. It didn't feel like a glitch. It felt like a premonition, a warning delivered through light itself. 8. Dark Night of the Scarecrow, 1981. This cult favorite is unsettling on its own, a tale of small-town vengeance and an innocent man's spirit returning through the field. But scenes of rural revenge were overshadowed by the broadcast oddities that marked its debut. During its first national airing, a strange low-frequency hum appeared whenever the Scarecrow stood motionless on screen. Not part of the music, not tied to any recorded effects, just a muffled vibration, subtle at first, growing stronger with each appearance. Those watching described feeling it more than hearing it, like pressure building behind the ears. Engineers eventually discovered that the hum appeared only during live transmission. Playback of the master tape revealed nothing. No interference, no background rumble. And the hum didn't blanket whole scenes, only the seconds where the Scarecrow was perfectly still, as if the broadcast itself sensed the wrongness of those moments. Dark Night of the Scarecrow is steeped in rural superstition and moral rot, and the broadcast distortion made the Scarecrow's presence feel less symbolic and more attentive. The hum felt like a warning, a pulse from something that shouldn't have been listening. The film frightened viewers, but the signal made them feel observed. 9. The Screaming Woman, 1972. For most viewers, The Screaming Woman is remembered as a pulpy TV thriller about a woman who hears faint cries coming from beneath the ground. But during its earliest broadcasts, something stranger than fiction occurred. Viewers reported hearing a second scream layered beneath the main actress's voice, thinner, more distant, and out of sync with the scene. Engineers confirmed no such audio existed on the tape. When they isolated the frequencies, they found nothing but silence. Yet during the live broadcast, a faint wailing threaded itself through the moment, like an accidental seance. The film itself is built on the terror of being unheard of, knowing something is wrong while everyone around you insists it's in your head. The mysterious double scream amplified that theme, turning an already tense story into something eerily metaphysical. Those who watched live insisted the second voice sounded trapped or buried beneath static, as though calling from a deeper layer of the broadcast. When ABC replayed the film months later, the scream did not return. Clean audio, smooth frequencies, no anomalies. But the viewers who caught the first airing still insist it happened, describing it not as a glitch but as an intrusion, something neither recorded nor transmitted, but something that slipped through. Horror doesn't always arrive with claws. Sometimes it's just a voice no one can trace. 10. Don't Go to Sleep, 1982. Don't Go to Sleep already unnerves with its uneasy suburban dread, but nothing prepared broadcast technicians for what happened during its early airing. In several regions, the film abruptly cut to a blank gray screen for 3 to 4 seconds during a climactic confrontation, yet the audio continued faintly underneath, distorted and hollow, as if echoing from a long hallway. Logs showed no missing frames, networks found no transmission outages, and most perplexing of all, the interruption aligned perfectly with the film's underlying theme of suppressed memory clawing its way back. The story follows a family torn apart by grief and guilt, haunted not by ghosts but by the weight of what they refuse to face. The accidental grayouts mimic dissociation moments when the mind blanks to protect itself. Viewers reported feeling watched during the silence, describing the audio as whispery, metallic, or coming from behind. When networks attempted a manual replay, the glitch never repeated. The scene played clean, crisp, intact, as though nothing unusual had happened. But for those who witnessed the original broadcast, the interruption felt frighteningly appropriate. Like the film's trauma was so strong, it overwhelmed the signal itself. Sometimes horror doesn't hide in shadows. Sometimes it hides in the space where the picture should be. 11. The Power, 1984. Several horror films have played with cursed objects, but The Power became associated with an unusual broadcast history long before it reached cult status. The first test screening suffered a sudden crackling interference whenever the Aztec amulet appeared, an interference that vanished the second the object left the frame. Crew members blamed a faulty speaker coil, yet the audio logs captured nothing abnormal. When the film aired years later on late-night television, viewers reported the same phenomenon. Bursts of static synced perfectly to the amulet's close-ups. The Power is a film about unseen forces manipulating the world from behind the veil. Its dread lies not in gore, but in the sense that something ancient is watching, waiting, choosing moments to announce its presence. The broadcast static amplified that idea, transforming a modest supernatural thriller into something that felt genuinely inhabited. What unsettled engineers was the consistency. Random interference is messy and unpredictable, but this static had rhythm. It rose, peaked, and faded like a suppressed voice straining to break through. The amulet was fiction, of course, but the interference behaved like a signal trying to answer it. Horror is often about suggestion, but The Power blurred the line. It didn't just depict a curse. For a moment, during those broadcasts, it sounded like one. 12. The Next Victim, 1971. On the surface, The Next Victim is a moody Italian giallo wrapped in paranoia, mirrors, and meticulous staging. But its earliest European broadcasts were anything but controlled. Multiple regional stations reported an identical malfunction. Precisely during the first murder sequence, the audio separated from the picture by several seconds, yet not in a way typical of desynchronization. The killer's footsteps echoed early, while the victim's scream arrived late, stretching the moment into a warped temporal loop that never existed in the original cut. Technicians checked the master reels. Perfect. Broadcasters reran the film hours later. Flawless. The anomaly appeared only in the first broadcast window, as though something wanted the scene fractured, a distortion that made the violence feel ritualistic, almost rehearsed. The Next Victim thrives on the dissonance between beauty and brutality, and the accidental delay paralleled that theme too eerily. Giallo films often play with time, memory, and fragmented perception, but this was something different, something no editor intended. Some viewers even claimed they heard breathing layered beneath the score, soft and rhythmic, matching neither actor nor soundtrack. It's the kind of glitch that makes you wonder whether the film malfunctioned or whether the moment demanded to be seen in pieces, as if the violence itself resisted clarity. Sometimes the next victim isn't on screen, it's the signal carrying the story. 13 Haunts, 1976. A psychological thriller wrapped in rural fog and buried secrets, Haunts was never meant to be a mainstream success, but its limited screenings became infamous for a phenomenon theaters couldn't account for. Projectionists reported abrupt frame snaps, violent jumps in the image that happened only during scenes of emotional breakdown. These weren't real changes, mechanical hiccups, or damaged film strips. The physical prints were flawless. The jumps happened only when the film was in motion, never when inspected. Haunts follows a woman grappling with trauma she can't quite name, and the film leans heavily on dreamlike unease. During those distorted screenings, the jumps landed precisely when her inner turmoil peaked, like the projection system itself recoiled. Viewers described a split-second flash of something between frames. Not an actor, not a prop, just a shape, gone before the mind could register it. No official version of the film contains these images. What makes Haunts unforgettable isn't its mystery, but its timing. The distortions behaved less like technical defects and more like emotional responses, like the film was exhaling sharply during its most fragile moments. Horror rarely feels personal. Haunts managed to make the screen itself feel complicit. 14. The Cat Creature, 1973. The Cat Creature was designed as a simple late-night thriller. A resurrected Egyptian spirit, a string of mysterious deaths, and a relic stolen from an ancient tomb. But its first network broadcast on ABC was overshadowed by something far stranger than its plot. During several scenes set in dimly lit hallways, the image darkened beyond what the cinematographer intended so severely that entire shapes vanished. Yet, when the tape was examined afterward, The brightness levels were perfect. No corruption, no mechanical cause. Technicians insisted the blackout patches appeared only on air, not on the recording. Viewers described moments when the shadows on screen seemed to swell and move, as if feeding on the broadcast itself. Some claimed they could see an outline crouching behind the actors, an outline absent from every surviving frame. The cat creature is already a moody film, drenched in quiet suspicion and slow-burning dread. But those anomalous shadows gave it an edge it never officially had. Thematically, it explores the idea of ancient forces reclaiming what was stolen. And somehow, the broadcast distortion mirrored that idea too perfectly. It was as though something old and unseen reached through the signal, reminding audiences that some curses don't fade, they adapt, and sometimes they find new ways to be seen. 15. The Spell, 1977. It begins like any other made-for-TV horror of the 70s, a troubled teenager, a fractured suburban family, and a quiet resentment simmering under pastel wallpaper. But during its first national broadcast, something happened that no technician could explain. 3 minutes into the film, as the opening chant faded, the audio collapsed into a deep mechanical groan, low, metallic, and human enough that hundreds of viewers called their local stations, asking if someone had hijacked the signal. Engineers rewound the tape. Nothing was wrong. The master audio was clean, untouched, impossibly normal. The spell itself tells the story of a bullied girl whose repressed anger manifests in strange, supernatural ways, a theme that seemed to bleed into reality the night it aired. Viewers claimed the distorted voice overlapped with the mother's lines, as if mocking them. Some insisted the voice whispered a name that wasn't in the script. ABC's technicians issued a formal apology, blaming a temporary modulation surge. Off the record, they admitted something unnerved them. The surge affected only the scenes involving the girl's powers, nowhere else. What lingers about the spell isn't its scares, but the eerie sensation that the malfunction wasn't random. It felt timed, deliberate, almost thematic, like the film's anger was bleeding past the screen. Sometimes the scariest distortions aren't glitches at all. They're echoes of something the story woke up. Bonus film, The Vanishing Room, 1988. Before we wrap, here's one more horror film you need to add to your list. The Vanishing Room is one of those obscure late 80s chillers that slipped through distribution cracks, resurfacing only in scattered regional broadcasts, and each appearance carried a strange digital whisper of its own. The film follows a young couple who inherit an old boarding house, only to discover that a particular upstairs room appears and disappears depending on who's looking for it. But the oddity that sealed its reputation came not from the narrative, but from the transmission itself. During its earliest televised airings, viewers reported a faint ghost frame at the beginning of every scene inside the titular room, a translucent image of the empty space, 1 second ahead of the actors entering it. It wasn't a double exposure. It wasn't a misplaced dissolve. It was as if the room itself appeared in the broadcast before the footage caught up, like a warning from the signal. Engineers combed through the broadcast logs. No extra frames existed. The master copy remained clean, unaltered. Yet during live transmission, the ghost frame flickered every single time the characters crossed the threshold, as though the house was revealing its true state for a heartbeat, only to let the story resume. The Vanishing Room is a film about unstable architecture, shifting memory, and the terror of confronting spaces that refuse to stay where you left them. The broadcast glitch turned that theme into something intimate and invasive. It felt less like an accident and more like the room reaching out, stepping forward into the signal before collapsing back into fiction. Some places hide, some places wait, and some, for a split second, announce themselves. If exploring the strange distortions hiding inside these broadcasts pulled you deeper into the shadows, consider staying with us as we uncover more forgotten corners of horror. There are countless films out there that slipped through the cracks, some by accident, some by design. But now I want to hear from you. Which of tonight's glitches unsettled you the most? And do you think they were mere technical errors or something trying to break through?